Metal Gear Rising did a great job at creating a new set of characters for Raiden to deal with. On top of having excellent visual design, each of them is a mirror for Raiden in some way. The downloadable content for the game, of which there are 2 packs currently out, focuses on 2 of these characters and their stories before the events of Metal Gear Rising. The first of these is Jetstream Sam, aka Minuano, aka the cool Brazilian Wind. The DLC for Sam focuses on his audition for the Winds of Destruction. A younger and more idealistic Sam is invited to Denver in order to test his skills, where he battles through the sewers below the World Marshal HQ, and then breaks into the building itself. Blade Wolf's DLC is also a prequel, detailing his time in Abkhazia immediately before the start of Metal Gear Rising. Sam plays differently from Raiden. This is actually a pretty cool thing. Instead of strong attacks like Raiden has, his fighting style is based around charged slashes. Other changes are important, but a little more subtle. Sam has a shorter window for parries and blocks, moves slower in Blade mode, and, for some inexplicable reason, has a double jump with an air dash. Sam also can't perform stealth kills. Apparently, he's too classy for that kind of a thing. These kills are replaced by a taunting mechanic. Sam can taunt enemies, which puts them into an enraged state. When enraged, enemies attack faster, deal more damage, and deal damage through your guard. They also take way more damage than they normally would, and a couple of them even change their movements. Platinum deserves praise for making Sam play differently, especially in light of the fact that his changes fit him thematically as a character. He's an honorable samurai. Why would he ever kill a person who was unaware? The issue here is that while these elements work in the story, they don't work particularly well in the gameplay. The taunting mechanic is Sam's biggest difference compared to Raiden. Sam takes more damage from blocking and has smaller parry windows, so unless you're extremely confident with your ability to parry enemies perfectly every single time, it's just not really worth it to use. It's especially problematic considering that Sam has no upgrades for his sword damage. You can upgrade your health and energy by finding items in the environment, but there's nothing to increase your damage output. On higher difficulties, this means you're almost entirely reliant on taunting, even to perform average amounts of damage against normal enemies. Since higher difficulties mean more damage taken, it just gets frustrating. Risk versus reward is one of the best ways to balance an in-game system, and I feel like that was the intent with Sam's combat style. It just doesn't work in gameplay. The bonuses you get for taunting are needed to do well, but the penalties for taunting are far too severe to make taunting worthwhile. Ultimately, it ends up feeling like you either have to choose playing as a dramatically underpowered character or a dramatically overpowered character that dies almost immediately. These concerns with the combat wouldn't be too bad, but Sam's style is the only new thing that the DLC has to offer. All of the areas are recycled from the main game, as are the enemies. The only new thing in the DLC is that the 3 boss fights, which are recycled from the main game, has some slightly altered AI and a couple of new moves. For the first 2 of those bosses, this is a nice little change, and it makes it different enough so that it's not too grating to fight them. But the game's penultimate encounter against Armstrong is every single terrible part of the previous fight with almost none of the good ones. His new attacks seem designed almost entirely around frustration, and they barely even work in the confines of the game. One move in particular, a series of charges back and forth that you need to dodge, is almost impossible to avoid since Armstrong moves so fast your lock on camera barely keeps track of him. Camera issues are also ripe in other portions of the DLC. The whole game is indoors, and Rising's camera just doesn't like being in confined spaces. In light of all this, Sam's DLC really isn't that good. I don't regret purchasing it, as I enjoy the game enough to still get something out of it, but it's just not engaging compared to the main game mode of Rising. There's an effort made to create a new playable character in the same game engine as Raiden, but it's just not as successful with Sam. Now, Blade Wolf? Blade Wolf's DLC is excellent. It's better than Sam's DLC in just about every way that it could be. I don't know if Platinum had more time to develop Blade Wolf, but it's clearly the better designed piece of content. Blade Wolf is a stealth-based character. He's got the fewest special moves of any character in the game, and his basic combos are limited to 3-hit combos of light and heavy attacks. To deal with this, almost every single encounter in the DLC can be beaten using stealth. Over the course of the DLC, there isn't a single fight, excepting the final boss, where you're forced to engage in direct combat. Admittedly, Blade Wolf isn't the most interesting character in a combat situation. He's actually kind of boring. He is weak, and he has very few options for dealing with enemies. The great thing is that Blade Wolf doesn't really need to be. The downloadable content is designed around stealth so perfectly that his lack of combat ability is never really an issue. Even the boss of the DLC chapter can be defeated using stealth. There is a problem that both of the DLC content packs share, and that's a serious lack of content. Once you've played through them a single time, you've experienced most of what there is to see. The only upgrades in the missions are collectible items, so BP is worthless. That means that the DLC lacks any alternate costumes, weapons, or wigs. It's kind of a weird choice, since as far as unlockables go, the weapons and armor you could get in Rising were little more than palette swaps with a couple of lines of change code to alter their variables. There's really no reason we couldn't have had a Maverick Sam or a Rising Armor Blade Wolf without some modified attributes. There's also no real reason that Blade Wolf or Sam couldn't have been selectable characters for the main game. It may have required some altered code to get them to work in the confines of the different levels with their jump mechanics and attack abilities, but it would have been a very simple way to add a whole bunch of content to this game. Blade Wolf and Sam's chapters succeed well enough. I obviously enjoyed Blade Wolf's section better, but I don't regret purchasing either of them. With all of their flaws, they're still Metal Gear Rising, and Rising is such a good game that these are very fun pieces of content despite all of their flaws.